Vince Carter set to become the first player in Toronto Raptors history to have his jersey retired. Carter's number 15 will be raised to the Raptors November the 2nd when the Raps host the Sacramento Kings. Carter will also be inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in October. He played 6 All-Star games for the Raps and won the Slam Dunk Contest in the year 2000. And that leads us to Hot Takes, brought to you by Harvey's with Bryan Hayes. Anyone who listened to Brian's radio show Overdrive on TSN Radio Monday knows his stance about this Vince Carter number retirement already. If you don't listen, if you're not in Toronto, you can go to wherever you get your podcasts. You listen to Overdrive there. It's a terrific show. I love it. Brian, I know your stance about this situation. For those who aren't aware of your stance, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I appreciate this, Jay, and I hope we have a lot of time because this one really, really bothers me. I think it's just the most ridiculous decision, and quite frankly, I think it's a distraction by the Raptors in the front office. I think they realize it's been an ugly couple of years here in Toronto. It's likely going to be an ugly couple of years forthcoming, and they're trying to distract the fan base by throwing them a bone that I don't believe a large majority of the fan base even wants, and that's the retirement of Vince Carter's number. I think there's only one player in the history of this franchise that is worthy of jersey retirement, and that's Kyle Lowry, and I'm sure that will be coming in the future. But this, to me, is a step too far. I have softened on Vince over the years, in large part because of the championship in 2019, to the point where I'd say, welcome into town. Come in, standing ovation. You're welcome in Toronto, whatever you want. I'm not booing him on the street. I'm not booing him at Scotiabank Arena. But a jersey retirement for a player that quit on this team and never won anything, to me, is ridiculous. And it's a sign that this team hasn't learned from being a champion. And they're going backwards here, and I can't quite understand it. Again, Vince put them on the map when he arrived in '99. Nobody's disputing that. I certainly wouldn't. I loved watching him play. He was a blast to watch play. But as much as he put them on the map when he arrived, he ripped them off when he went out. And when he quit on this team and quit on this fan base, and again, it just doesn't meet the criteria of a jersey retirement. He's way too polarizing, in my opinion, the most polarizing athlete in the history of Toronto sports. He was barely here. He ended up playing for over 20 years. He was here for like 6 years, won 1 playoff round. That, to me, is just, it makes no sense. I don't know why Masai Ujiri is doing this other than from a marketing standpoint because it's the 30th anniversary and they want some buzz in the marketplace. But this isn't the buzz that they should be looking for. This isn't positive buzz. This, to me, is ridiculous that Kyle Lowry's not going up first. And again, in my opinion, Jay, he's the only one that meets the criteria. Not Vince, not DeMar, not Kawhi. And the idea that they're trying to beat Brooklyn to the punch is equally as embarrassing to me. Brooklyn Nets have won nothing. They've done nothing. Yes, they're retiring his number in January. Who cares? Let them do their own thing. The idea of trying to get in front of the line of the Brooklyn Nets, it's embarrassing. It's a ridiculous decision by the Raptors.
Okay, let's switch to the Raptors Scotiabank Arena roommates, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have a new head coach who's making some changes, including no more tunes at practice, Brian. No more music at practice. Thoughts?
Ultimately, this is not going to change a thing for me in terms of projecting what's going to happen with this team in the future, Jay. Them having music or not having music in September will not ultimately turn the switch on in Game 7 in April or May, right? I don't think they're beating Boston because they don't have music in training camp. But I think ultimately what this is Craig Berube trying to establish a Craig Berube operation. And that's really what's happening here. And I don't think he's coming in and getting rid of the music because Sheldon Keefe allowed it. He's not countering Sheldon Keefe, although I think most fans would say do the opposite of what they used to do because it didn't work ultimately when they got to the dance. But this is about Craig Berube, who's been in this league for like 40 years. You know, as a player and as a coach and as obviously a guy who's won before and won a Stanley Cup when he was in St. Louis. And he wants this team to be run with not an iron fist, but with more maturity and I think more professionalism. He looks at practice as it's time to work, it's time to communicate, and all these little things add up for him, right? Whether it's no music at practice, whether it's dressing a certain way on the road, whether it's team meetings and when they start, what you're going to do when you go for team meals, all that kind of stuff from the outside Guys like you and I and the fans, we don't quite understand the value in it. We may roll our eyes and say, what's the point of it? But as long as the head coach sees a purpose in it and the players buy into it, ultimately, if it pays off in the end, it's all good. So Berube is going to do what he's going to do to make sure this team runs like a Craig Berube team is supposed to be run. And I guess that starts with getting rid of music. And if the players don't like it, believe me, they're not going to complain to him because he would answer them pretty quickly.
Yes. Nobody would question Craig about just about anything, really, because he's absolutely terrifying. Bryan, I wanted to ask you about a conference that's near and dear to your heart, the NFC. It's truly fascinating 3 weeks in. You've got the Niners, the presumed favorite. They're battling so many injuries right now. They're 1-2. You've got the Lions. They've been good. They haven't been great by any stretch. The Cowboys and Eagles have more questions than answers. My question for you is simply this. Does this open the door at this point, this early part of the season, for one of these 3-0 NFC teams like the Vikings or Seahawks, or maybe even your 2-1 Green Bay Packers, to take over this conference, Bryan?
It sure feels that way to me, Jay. It really does. It feels like it's wide open at this point, and it wasn't a few weeks ago. After the Niners beat up on the Jets on Monday night, week 1, I thought, okay, here we go. Like, they did that without McCaffrey, and it's all good. I'm not sure when McCaffrey's going to play again. And like you said, they got a lot of injuries on both sides of the ball. The Niners look like they're in big trouble. I don't trust the Eagles. I don't trust really the Cowboys right now. I think there's time for these teams to figure it out. But it gets to what you just talked about. The teams that have been off to a hot start, the Seattles, the Minnesotas, the fact that Green Bay's 2-1 without Jordan Love, if they can separate, you can put yourself in a great position because those teams have to figure themselves out. The cream of the crop coming in to the season in the NFC was the Niners. It was maybe the Rams. They don't look so great. They're 1-2. They should be 0-3 if the Niners could close the deal on Sunday. It was Detroit. It was Philly. It was Dallas. None of these teams look like world beaters right now. But if you let them stay in the dance and they get hot at the right time, then they might pounce, come December into January into the playoffs. But if you're Minnesota, if you're Seattle, if you're Green Bay, if your teams maybe even in the NFC South, like New Orleans, like Tampa, you must be absolutely salivating right now because that top seed looks like it may not need 14 wins. Mm-hmm. You may not have to keep up with the Niners, with these teams who have dominated for years, and that's all you need. You get into the playoffs, maybe you get home field, you can really take advantage of that. And, parity doesn't always exist in pro sports. I think a lot of times it's overstated in the NFL. Look at the AFC. The Chiefs are 3-0. They're doing exactly what we thought they would. But the fact that it could be more of a race and more wide open, and it certainly looks that way through 3 weeks, I think is big in the NFC, and maybe one of those teams you mentioned actually has a chance to do some serious damage this year, and I didn't see that coming 3 weeks ago.
And it's fun. I think it makes the season more enjoyable. The same old stories are over. Now we got some new ones to tell this season. It should be a blast, and just like Harvey's been serving Canadians for 65 years, delicious burgers, triple pickle poutine. This guy, Bryan Hayes, has been serving up hot takes since 1983. Another terrific outfit, buddy. We'll see you next week.
Hot Takes is presented by Harvey's. Customize your burger and get it delivered from our app to your door. Harvey's, it's a beautiful thing.